This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jennifer Capola. I work at Seul and D'Onofrio here in North Haven. I'm one of the town attorneys, and I'm here tonight just to give a quick introduction of David Fink, who's going to be leading the first affordable housing public information meeting for the town. Just by way of background, all the Connecticut municipalities do need to develop and adopt an affordable housing plan by next June 1st of 2022. And David is here. He's working with our Council of Governments, SCROG, the South Central Council of Governments, and the other member municipalities in our Council of Governments to assist in development of an affordable housing plan for each town. He is a housing consultant. He'll probably tell you a little bit more about his background, which is many years long, I know. And so he'll give his presentation. The folks who are present will have an opportunity to ask any questions that they'd like. This is being recorded, as all informational meetings will be, and it will be posted on the town's website. So please, for those of you who are here, encourage people to watch it. The town wants, of course, as many residents and property owners to be involved in this process of developing an affordable housing plan for the town as are possible. So we encourage comments. David's providing his contact information for comments. We also have now an affordable housing plan advisory committee that's been appointed by the Board of Selectmen. They were appointed by at the last meeting of the Board of Selectmen. So they'll be having monthly meetings, potentially bi-monthly meetings, and those are going to be noticed, of course, through the town's website. So the public is encouraged to come to those meetings and participate in the process that way as well. There will be public comment noted on each agenda of the committee, and we intend to have more public informational meetings as the process goes along as well as those committee meetings. And then, of course, when the Board of Selectmen goes to review the proposed plan and adopt it, there will be a public hearing. So there will be an opportunity for the public to participate at that point as well. And of course, review the final draft of the plan and offer any comments and ask any questions about the proposed plan. So David, I'm going to turn it over to you. I thank you very much on behalf of the town for coming and sharing your knowledge with us about affordable housing tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and welcome to all of you and all of you who are watching. As Jennifer said, I am a consultant to SCROG. SCROG has, with a vote of the towns in the region, decided or is in the business now of creating individual affordable housing plans for every town in the region with information that will provide some regional housing market information and other information. I, as part of that process, have the role of coming to talk to towns, to town forums of residents, to housing committees, to zoning and planning boards around the region, whatever the towns want. And so I'm here to help, to maybe provide some ideas, and really to kind of talk about how we can talk about affordable housing so the towns can be successful and make sure that residents of the towns get what they want. A little bit about my background. I was a newspaper reporter and editor for 27 years. I started to do work as a housing policy director for the Partnership for Strong Communities, which is based in Hartford. I did that for about 15 years. I've been a consultant for different housing organizations since then. I began talking to Mike Frieda about housing a number of years ago, and I want to congratulate the town. I mean, the town has really made progress on housing. They've done it the right way, slowly, well considered, thinking about not just what housing you need, but where it's best to put it, and maybe just as important, where not to put it. So I think that the town has done well. And so what I'll try to do is take you quickly through this. I know a lot of you know a lot about housing already, so I don't want to belabor too many points and go over stuff you know already. So I'll try to go through it, hopefully provide you with some ideas to think about, and then we can have a discussion. As I tell every town, I will never tell a town what to do. It's not my place, number one. Number two, I don't know enough about your town. And number three, all towns are different. So I can't, it's not to say that because one town does something that another town should do the same thing. Towns have to decide on their own. Housing, as you know, is vital, but it's controversial. People are concerned about where they live, who their neighbors are, what their neighborhood looks like, and we have to all be sensitive to that idea. Housing is, can bring opportunity, but it can be, if you don't have the house that is appropriate for your family or one that you can afford, it can really bring failure in your life, and that's something we need to understand. I think it's really good that you've appointed a housing advisory group. I talked to Mike about that. I've talked to Rich about that, and Jennifer. A number of towns are doing that around the state. West Hartford, where I live, just created one. Madison has one. Guilford has one. Towns like Old Saybrook and Stonington, Fairfield, a number have had them, and found that they are a way to spread the gospel, if you will, to spread education and communicate with residents about what housing do we have, what housing do we need, where can we put it, where people will be okay with it, where should we not put it, so that people won't have a problem with it. That's really the goal here, is to educate the residents, because the plan that's being created through SCROG by RKG Associates, which is the Boston-based consultant that they've hired, should not be SCROG's plan or RKG's plan. It should be your plan. And the great thing about housing advisory groups in the different towns that I've been to is that they're a group of thoughtful people. They are open-minded. They think about stuff. They tend to know the town well. They have friends and colleagues throughout the town. They belong to organizations, congregations, just social groups that allow them to talk to a lot of people and understand what the people want too. So it's really good that you've done that, and it's really important because, as you know, most people in most towns, not just, I created this PowerPoint for all the towns, but it generally applies. Most people are good people. People in a town like this are well educated. They're open-minded, they're thoughtful. You're going to run into some people who tend to be closed-minded. You can't discount them, you can't alienate them. You have to help them think about it more. And that's good. I mean, I understand why some people are, they believe stereotypes like that all affordable housing is Father Panic Village or Pruitt-Igoe, and it's the projects, and it's full of dangerous people. I understand that because that's what TV has portrayed over the years. That's what some people believe. And I can't blame them for being fearful of that. Most people, when they sign a check to buy their house, it's the biggest check they've ever written and the biggest one they're ever gonna write. And everything's tied up in that house. Their security, their kids' education, their retirement, their quality of life, their neighborhood. So I don't blame people for being worried that the town is going to plop the wrong kind of housing with the wrong kind of people too close to them and threaten their security. That may not be real. There may be good examples already in North Haven. You guys have created some really, fine examples of mixed income housing. But it's real that they believe it. And we need to be sensitive to that. We can't discount those people. We have to bring them along, show them examples, talk to them, hear out their fears, let them be part of the conversation. I took behavioral psychology in college. Some of you have too. Loss is a principal motivator for people. They are afraid to lose the town they love. They're afraid to lose the home, the neighborhood, the street, the community they love. Okay, we need to understand that and be sensitive to that. And the towns that have done well have created a conversation where people get a chance to voice their concerns and come to forums and talk to people who have become educated and are expert about the town's housing stock, like you. So it's really something to be sensitive to. And like I said, the people who get uptight about it, let's talk to them. Let's not discount them, because they're good people. They fear what is rational. The idea of being inclusive and communicating and saying we're going to build something together, not that people are going to build the actual bricks and mortar housing. They're going to build together the vision of the town that they want, is really important. And, as a housing advisory group, it's logical. You need to educate yourselves if you don't know already. What does the town have? What does the town need? Where can we put it? And the choices, giving people choices is vital. All of us who've had kids, it's a lot easier to tell your children, honey, you can have the peas or the broccoli, not insist they have to have the broccoli. Give them a choice. You can have it with ketchup or without. People, not to treat people as children. They're not. But people deserve choices. And that, in a conversation, a town conversation, town forum, it's good to say, we're not going to put it here whether you like it or not. Let's think about the different places in the town where we can build the housing we need, and let the town discuss it and figure out what are good choices for them. There are a lot of myths about housing, about property values and school costs and crime. There's good research that we can provide you and you can offer to the town to show that what a lot of people fear is not the case, that the research shows it's not the case. I'll give you some examples of that in the meantime. Again, the idea is, you have to figure out what your goal is. Towns have decided, well, we have too many people who are burdened by their housing costs. It's defined as spending more than 30% of your income on housing. That's when you're burdened by your housing costs. Now, needless to say, a millionaire, somebody who's making $1 million a year, if they spend $300,000 on housing, they still got plenty left over for food and clothing and their other necessities. But somebody who's making $50,000 a year and is spending $15,000 of that on housing does not have a lot left over. And that's the idea of being burdened by it. So does the town, as its goal, want to provide housing that's a little less expensive so people who are not making a lot of money will have more left over for food, clothing, childcare, healthcare, transportation, insurance, take their kids to a movie? Normally that's very good for town merchants. If people have more expendable income, the merchants do more business. So that sort of thing. Do you want people in town who can't afford to live here now? There are a lot of towns, particularly rural towns in the state, that want their elderly to age in place. They don't want them to have to go into a nursing home. Well, for them to do that, they have to have, because they don't have a lot of transportation, they need to have people who serve as nurses' aides and caretakers be able to live in town so they can get to those homes and allow those elderly people to stay in their homes and not have to move to the nursing home. Again, the factors to remember, housing is the foundation of opportunity, and it does have an impact on educational success. A town like North Haven has good schools. So any family that's going to be able to have their, live in this town and send their kid to these schools that child's going to get a better education. That child will probably do better later. Housing has an impact on all of this. If you can provide people a home that has access to childcare and healthcare and transportation, their costs are lower, their quality of life is better. One thing I should tell you, you won't convince everyone I mean, there are going to be people who are going to say, no matter how well considered your decisions are about what you want to do and where you want to do it, there are going to be people who are going to object, and it's their right. It's America. And I wouldn't try to, make it unanimous. I mean, a good story is Guilford. I was invited when I was at the Partnership for Strong Communities about 6 years ago by the Guilford Foundation to come in there. They wanted to build more income-restricted housing. And they created a committee out of their Interfaith Council and other, community leaders. And they put a survey on their town website, and they got 400 responses. Now, 50 of them were unkind. People said, some, harsh things. But 350 of them were very supportive. And that gave their housing committee, it gave the first selectman, it gave the town leaders confidence that there's support for this. At PS, 2 years ago, they had to have a referendum to convey land near their train station. They have a Shoreline East train station to a developer for 16 units of housing, and it passed by 200 to 30 or thereabouts. So they were able to develop support, but they had a conversation. They used a bunch of tools over the years. They created a committee. They had town forums. We created for them 2 videos. One was soundless, if you can imagine. It was people on the committee holding up whiteboards saying, our town needs a wider array of housing options because, and they each filled it in, and we filmed them, and they played that film on a continuous loop in the town library, because a lot of people use the library in town. I'm sure North Haven has a library or other buildings that people go into. And the advantage of that was that somebody would walk in and say, see Jennifer on there. What's Jennifer doing on here? And they'd look and they'd go through the loop one time, and then they'd go home and say to the wife, hey, Mabel, you'll never believe I saw Jennifer on there. And she said, and it started a conversation, and it educated the town. We created another video with sound, with the same people creating the video, and they played it at the League of Women Voters and the Rotary Club for the Zoning Commission, the Town Council. Again, the conversation is important because the important stuff gets said, or the important conversations happen not just at a town forum. They happen on the sidelines of the soccer game on Saturday afternoon. They happen in aisle 8 of the Stop and Shop. What are they trying to do here? And people discuss it, and you have people out there who know what the town is trying to do. I call housing a tap water issue, and here's the reason why. When I get up in the morning to brush my teeth and wash my face, I turn on the water and I have no idea how it got there, because I never studied that. I took it for granted, and I always have. Housing's the same way. Most people, national state polls have indicated over the years, 85–90% of people are satisfied with their housing situation. So they don't think about it. They've always had enough money to get the home, whether it's a rental or ownership opportunity that they need, and it's always been available. Okay. So again, they don't think about it. It's a tap water issue. Like I say, everyone cares about housing. They just don't know they care about it because they don't think about it. So that's the thing. Towns have not usually purposely created housing. Purposefully, they've just allowed it to happen. And the way most suburban towns developed, a developer, as you know, would come in and he'd say, I just bought a 40-acre cornfield, and it tells the zoning commission I'd like to build 40 single-family homes on that, and people want them, and the towns needed them back 40 years ago, essentially in the 70s, when I was in my 20s, and they all got sold in about 2 weeks, and everybody was happy. Well, things changed about 10 years ago. About 2010, 2011, demographically, things shifted. And people, baby boomers my age, suddenly realized, our kids are gone, we don't want to rake the leaves and shovel the snow anymore, we'd like to downsize. Our kids, burdened with education debt, and Connecticut has the highest education debt per capita in the nation, are thinking, well, even if I can get a mortgage, I don't think I want to, I may not want to take on any more debt. So they needed a smaller, more affordable place near transit. Their parents, the boomers, wanted to downsize. They needed a smaller place. Suddenly there was this huge demand for multifamily housing and townhomes and variations on the theme. And that's what's happened. And, there are lots of reasons, like I say here, for creating it, but, some of it is, to, allow your kids to come home after college and graduate school. Kids want very often to be near their families. They want a place to live that's close by. Well, there needs to be a place. Like I say, elderly, so that they can age in place. Boomers who want to downsize. Those who you'd like to have live in the town come back home. Some towns are very intent on making sure that their teachers and their police and their firefighters can live in the town that they serve. So, again, we used to say at the Partnership for Strong Communities, strong towns need all kinds of people, and all kinds of people need all kinds of housing. And so the question is for towns to look at, do we have the spectrum of housing choices that we really need? And that's what you and the town's residents are going to try to figure out. It's in everyone's interest. If housing's too expensive in the town, the merchants don't do as well. If housing's too expensive in the town, you don't get as many young people moving in. The value of single-family homes for all those boomers who want to sell is dependent upon how many bids they get. If you have young people moving to town because they can find a place that's appropriate and they can afford, they decide North Haven's a great town. And we found friends here, and we found a church here, and we found a school district here, and we want to stay here, and we want to buy here. And that leads to more bids for more homes, and it raises the value and swells the grand list. So, it's in everyone's interest to, provide that array of housing options. A little bit about Connecticut's housing situation. We go between the 5th and 6th in median monthly housing prices. Housing's expensive in Connecticut. The Gini coefficient is a measure of wealth disparity. So it would be 0 if everybody made exactly the same income and had the same amount of money, and it would be 1 if one person had all the money in town and everyone else had none. Connecticut is roughly about 0.49, 0.50. Pretty high. We're second in the nation in wealth disparity. The problem there is that when you have a lot of wealthy people, they drive up the cost for middle class and moderate income people, and so they drive up the cost of everything, whether it's clothing or cars or food, but also the price of housing, because they can pay for it and others can't. So that's the problem with wealth disparity. Statewide, about 48% of the renters and 32% of the homeowners are burdened by their housing costs, like I said. North Haven's a little better than that. About 44% of the renters and about 25% of the homeowners are burdened by the cost. Like I said, that does not mean that they're all suffering, because if you spend 30% of your income but you're a millionaire, you still got a lot left over. But for people on the lower end of the income spectrum, that's an issue. I looked, because I did this research, and I was amazed. The Department of Labor website has 680 or so occupations, separate occupations. And I looked to see how many of them could or made the average wage, the housing wage, which is put out every year for every state by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And in Connecticut, it's $27.37 an hour you have to make, or about $57,000 a year to afford a typical two-bedroom apartment in Connecticut. Nearly half don't make that much. So, again, it's an issue. Doesn't mean they're homeless. Doesn't mean they can't find a place. What it means is they're spending more than 30% generally for the place they're renting. This is the way Connecticut grew. 2/3 of the towns have built more than 40% of their homes since 1970. Again, that's what I meant. Boomers were then, like me, like some of you, in the 70s, in our 20s, we got married, we wanted a single-family home, and Connecticut, except for its cities, which are hundreds of years old, the suburbs grew a lot then. They built single-family homes. As a result, about 3/4 of the town have about 70% single-family homes. North Haven is a little higher than that, but not really out of whack. I mean, their town's higher than North Haven. North Haven has about 80–85% single-family homes. So if your housing stock is skewed to one end with a lot of single-family homes, you may not have as many rungs on the ladder for people to get on that housing ladder with an apartment they can afford, and a condo or a townhome, and then ultimately to buy up some of the other housing stock in town. You don't have a commuter rail station here, but housing again. If you can put it near shopping, walkable to it, or on a bus line, that's good. I didn't list North Haven here, but you guys are getting it. Other towns are getting it too. These are towns that have commuter rail, which is what I was getting at. So places like Bethel, Danbury, Guilford, Windsor Locks, Milford, they're putting housing near transit. You don't have the Hartford line station yet, and I'm not really sure, because I haven't checked in when that's going to happen. I don't know if this infrastructure bill in Congress, if it ever passed, would provide money for that. It might. Let's see. Okay. Housing costs. Generally in the state, 32% of a typical household's income goes to housing, 19% for transportation, and between 6 and 12% for energy costs. Housing is the largest part of a family's budget, except if they have young children at home, and then childcare can be even more expensive than housing, a bigger part of it. It vacillates each year. 30 to 31 municipalities have more than 10% income restricted units. They tend to be the cities and some first-ring suburbs. There are a few that are not first ring. What I mean by that is bordering right on the city, like places like Ansonia and Derby. They have more than 10%, but those typically are the types of towns. And those towns tend to be have lower revenues, higher tax rates, and they can't afford as many resources in their schools or as many services. There is also this phenomenon, besides poverty level households, what ALICE households. The United Way has done 4 versions of this study called ALICE. ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. So essentially working poor or working class families. These families are not poverty level, but they're close. The survival budget that United Way talked about in its research says $28,000 a year for an individual, and about between $80,000 and $90,000 a year for a household. Now, all of us, I think, are old enough to know that $80,000, $90,000 a year used to be a lot of money. Not anymore. It's hard for a household of 4 to do everything they need to do with $80,000 or $90,000. So how did we look at those households? They are households that, I don't want to say they're this close to homelessness, but they are households that if the carburetor goes or the water heater goes, or they, mom's hours are cut at, her job at Target, or that they have a problem making ends meet. And every town has them. As I say, a huge majority of towns in Connecticut, even some of the wealthiest towns, have better than 20% of their households are ALICE households. Those are people to think about, and they tend to be the people who are burdened by their housing costs. The good thing about North Haven is that even though you have, as measured by United Way, about 30% ALICE households, you've really done a good job increasing your percentage of income-restricted homes. I guess the number Jennifer told me today was up to 5.9, close to 6%. Again, your renter and homeowner percentages of burdened household is a little lower than the state average. So, that's good. But, these are numbers to be aware of. And as you can see, there are home municipalities that are dealing with, even larger burdens than that. Again, this is what I mentioned before. On average, in the state, about 2/3 of people own and about a third rent. In North Haven, it's a little more, about 4 out of 5 own and about 1 out of 5 rent. I'll just skip this. This is more detail than we need. There are, like I said, good sources of research, good studies that have been done. This I just point out as an example. A lot of people worry, and I understand this, that if we build more housing, we're going to get more school children. And they do the math, and they say, well, if our town school budget is $1,000 and we have 10 children, that means it costs us $100 per child. They divide 10 into 1,000. That is, at least the research shows, the wrong way to do the math. Rutgers did this whole study back in about 2008. There have been other studies, anecdotal, that have borne it out, like Town of Fairfield in 2019. Essentially, if you create a one-bedroom multifamily unit, Rutgers found you get 0.04 children. In other words, 4 school children for every 100 one-bedroom units you create. And it stands to reason. There are not many parents who are going to live in a one-bedroom home with a child. Just not. But every once in a while you do, and I interviewed a woman a few years ago who did in Fairfield. So it happens, but it doesn't happen often. 2-bedroom unit, you get 0.27. In other words, 1 out of every 4 that you create. Again, that stands to reason. Most of the time, a 2-bedroom is going to be 2 singles sharing, a young couple that wants a second bedroom as a study and for friends who are visiting. A third might be grandma who wants a second bedroom for the grandkids when they sleep over on the weekend. But 1 out of 4 times, you'll get a parent and a child. 3-bedroom units, you start to get some more school children. But the anecdotal evidence, in addition to the Rutgers study, shows that you just don't get as many school children as people think. And generally, they are spread over a number of grades and a number of schools. So the other thing that's been found on school children, and again, I just cite this as an example, is that school budgets, UMass did this study a while ago, school budgets are mostly sensitive, not so much to enrollment, to healthcare costs, labor costs, and energy costs. And unless your enrollment goes up so much that you have to add a modular classroom or classrooms or build another school or hire more teachers, it's not really going to affect your and with declining enrollments, it's like this room here. We could, add 15 more people in this room here and still not have to pay any more for heat and light and move to a larger room. So that, again, is just by way of example. And we can provide you with that kind of research. Same thing with property values. That it's thought that income-restricted housing, mixed-income housing will lower neighboring property values. It just doesn't show up that much. Now, that is not to say, and I think all of us would agree, if you take a 100-unit multifamily development and plop it down in the middle of a single-family neighborhood, some people might not want to live there, and so values might go down. And that's, stands to reason, and that's why, towns look hard at where are we going to put this housing. Are we going to put it on a commercial in area? Are we going to put it along a bus route? Are we going to put it near the train station? Are we going to put it near the town center or in the town center? In other words, places where you're not going to upend family life, quality of life, what people have gotten used to. Again, they don't want to lose the community, the neighborhood, the quality of life that they've had, and that's eminently doable. Again, a few more statistics, but I've talked mostly about these already, so I'll skip this. Demographic data, again, you can look at this in your time, but North Haven is not out of whack with other towns in the region, in terms of racial breakdown and the housing mix. So again, how can you bring prices down? Well, obviously, Mark Twain said, invest in land, God's not making any more. The way to cut prices for homes is to allow density. In other words, build up, not out. That cuts the land cost. You can, if you put one unit on a lot, the cost of that land is, figured into how much you're going to sell that one unit for. If you put 20 units on that lot, you can divide the land cost around, by those 20 units and spread the land cost. And the land cost really is the variable when you create housing, as I'm sure you guys know. Whether you build housing for rich people or poor people, the material and the labor essentially going to be the same. So it's really the land cost. And so the question then becomes, are you going to do the usual suspects, like for sale properties, vacant properties, properties that you may have gotten from the state? Those tend to not be the best properties all the time. One idea to think about that some towns are doing quietly is, you know how cities have redevelopment authorities. Redevelopment authorities understand the idea that towns are not built out, that there's really no such thing as built out, because as we know, when you go to older cities, you don't see a lot of homes from the 1600s and 1700s and 1800s there anymore. These properties have been repurposed. They've been knocked down and other things have been built upon them. So the question then becomes for suburban towns, and we got a lot of them in this state, about 130 of them. Have they done that proactively before? Have they gone up to homeowners, not homeowners rather, landowners, typically industrial or commercial landowners, and said, hey, we've noticed that your property is on a bus line, and we think this would be a great place to put 20 units of housing that we really need. And if we rezone this property, you could probably get 2-3 times more for it than you can give under the present zoning. Would you be willing to sell? And you might ask 10 of those people that, and 7 of them might say no, but 3 of them might say yeah, because they were thinking of retiring anyway, or they can move their business or that sort of thing. I know 2 municipalities, I can't name them, where they have recognized that they have from the 50s or 60s, what's a good way of putting this, strip malls, like most towns have, that have, time has passed them by. So 4 of the 8 storefronts are vacant, and they've gone to the owner of the property, the strip mall, and said, when the leases are up on the other 4 properties, do you think you might be willing to sell? Because on a bus line, it's near shopping, it would be a good place to put this kind of entry-level housing for people who, young couples or professionals want to move to town. And they're talking to these people about, maybe we can turn this commercial property into housing. Again, the issue is have a discussion in town. Let people talk about, are there places in town where we'd be okay with higher density and we'd be okay with these kinds of units. That's what the town conversation will engender, because some people will be okay with it, some people won't be okay with it, some people may get convinced, other people may not get convinced, but at least people's ideas will come forth, and you can learn about that. I would say also that affordability is not as valuable in some places as it is in others. Affordability is great when low and moderate income people will benefit by living there. There are rural towns where if you put homes that those people could afford very far away from jobs and transportation and shopping, and that family has to get, buy a $500 clunker that gets 8 miles to the gallon and breaks down every other week. Have you really done them a favor? Not really. So it's good to put it where it's good to put it, and it's not so good to put it where it's going to be out of the way. And towns have found that. And like we said, it can reduce sprawl and auto emissions and enhance mass transit. Like I said, this town, like other towns, are using these kinds of strategies and tools, having forums to educate the town, creating housing committees, surveys, slideshows, videos, putting this on the website as you're going to do. So this town, I would never tell, again, what to do. All those tools and strategies may not work for this town. You have to do what's good for your town, that's going to communicate and get the message out, and not do what might not be appropriate. Again, there are some misconceptions. There is research. We can provide that for you guys, that gets at these issues of property values and school costs and neighborhood quality. I have some photos to show you. I don't have the photos from North Haven, but I know that you have created some really good-looking housing that is well-designed and fits its surroundings, and I wanted to show you that there are other towns that have done this. So here's New Canaan that created some really nice homes, you can see with balconies, and that's worked out great. Avon, mixed income 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. Here's Stonington. This is part of about an 80 unit development on Route 1. Farmington, a fellow named Jeff Sager from Metro Realty built this beautiful development on Route 6. These are townhouses. Brookfield, this is part of a huge development of 300 or 400 units, and they found a good location for it, and again, it's worked out. Darien, this is the repurposing of an old nursing home, and they created, I think, about 25 units in here, and the footprint worked. These units came out very well. South Windsor, this is elderly townhomes, but I think they include first floor bedrooms. So that's good for elderly people. They don't have to go upstairs necessarily to sleep. Here, this is Fairfield, right on the Bridgeport line. This is about 60 units, and also, nicely done. In Wallingford, you may be familiar with this. This is Old Oak Village along the Merritt Parkway. Liz Verna, who's a wonderful person, is the president of Verna Builders. These are about 80 freestanding condos, if you will. So you buy the structure and you own about 10 feet circumference around the home, so you can plant what you want in the garden, and the association takes care of the plowing and the rest. So again, for Wallingford, they wanted to have some single-family home options there. So and this has worked out well. And the thing about all of these is that they look as good now or better, because the landscaping has grown in, as it did when they were built. So it's possible, as you know already because you've done it, that you can design really good-looking housing. Again, will disabuse some people of the stereotype that income-restricted housing or affordable housing is, been built of cinder blocks or Quonset huts and looks ugly and terrible. And as you can see, these places don't have graffiti on the walls and use syringes on the ground and all the things that people, again, we understand why they're fearful about this. It's rational for them to be fearful about it because it's their home and their livelihood and their well-being and their family. But we can show them, towns can show them examples of how it's really worked out well. These I gave you just for 2 examples to show the opportunity. Montgomery County, Maryland, about 10, no, it's a little longer now, about 12 years ago, decided to create housing. 12 or 13% of the units would be income restricted for people at 60% of median income. Those kids moved in, Rand Corporation did the study. Guess what? Their math and reading scores went up. So again, to show that housing in good schools, in good towns like North Haven and a lot of the towns in the region can provide opportunity for people, and kids do better, and we can solve societal problems. Another way to solve societal problems, Richard Rothstein wrote the book, The Color of Law. He talks about the fact that in post-World War II, the Federal Housing Administration told developers, we will lend you money or we'll guarantee your loans, but not if you sell to black people. And so my parents, your parents, they all bought, after they came home from the war, that $7,500 cape, and it appreciated over 30, 35 years to $350,000. And that wealth accrual paid for college educations, and it started businesses, and it got invested in the stock market. And so middle-class people could develop some wealth. We didn't all become rich, but we had a decent life. If you weren't allowed to buy that home back after the war, and you had to rent that whole time, you couldn't build that wealth. And that's the reason why we have some of the problems we have today, because that was, a decision that was made then. Now, don't get me wrong, Federal Housing Administration thought that they were being good stewards of taxpayers' money, and it was their fiduciary responsibility to not lend it in cases or for homeowners who they thought might be a bad risk. That aside, we can argue all day long about whether that was a good idea, but it's an example of the fact that wealth, just by buying a house, can build, and we can provide opportunity, and we allow people to live in good school districts with high-quality schools. They'll do better in their lives. Just a few issues the town's got to ask, or every town needs to ask. Are your residents burdened by housing costs? Is there a range of supply to allow people, to stay here, to move here? What resources can we offer and build around? Is it, do we have a transit station? Do we have a bus line? Do we have schools? And questions we can talk about after, because I'm almost done here. Do people really know what affordable housing is? I get that question all the time. And people think I'm being a wise guy when I say, well, affordable housing is housing you can afford, because people earn different amounts of money. And some people who own, make $50,000 a year can afford some housing, but not other. People who, earn $100,000 a year can afford some housing, but not other. So it's housing people can afford, and we have to think about that. Small a affordable housing is the reference to the idea that there is some housing that, just because of the market, is affordable to a lot of people. So it's small a affordable housing. It's not income restricted by a deed or some other government financing that restricts what you can sell or rent it for. Is it good to have it? Sure, it's good to have it. Just need to understand that the market sometimes can knock the cost of that housing up very quickly. I just visited my daughter, who lives in Greenpoint in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn. And 25 years ago, you couldn't give away places in Greenpoint. Well, now they're going for like a lot of money because the market has pushed that. So small a affordable housing is good to have as long as it stays affordable for people, but the market can push it out of their reach. We can talk about, too, the 830G statute. That is a very controversial statute if you don't know about it. Too long to get into it right here. It's been used by developers to coerce towns and squeeze concessions from them. It has also, on the other hand, produced some housing that people need. So we can talk about that a little bit. What can we learn from other towns' experiences? No towns are exactly alike. I wouldn't say it's a fool's errand to look at other towns. I think it's a good idea, but you can't just copy what other towns do, because every town has different demography and geography and politics and history and housing market and housing stock. Again, you need to ask the questions, how unaffordable is the town's housing? What measures can we use? To measure that. What are the factors that need to be present to create income-restricted units? In some towns, Old Saybrook is a great example. Old Saybrook needed so much market, so much multifamily housing, and they have a train station, that a developer came in. He put 186 units right next to the train station. He made 20% of them, 37, income restricted for people at 60 or 80% of median income, and they all rented in no time because the market supported it. He didn't need a dime of subsidy. So I know developers come in all the time and they want help. They want tax abatement. They want this. They want that. If you learn what your market is and what the need is, you don't necessarily have to, say yes to everything a developer wants. West Hartford, in my town, for the very, very first time, just gave developers who are going to make 12% of the units in about a 300-unit development, very first time gave them a tax abatement. The town had never wanted to do that. They thought it was important to do. I'm not sure you have to do that all the time. My town also, I know, relaxes parking requirements for developers sometimes, but not right away. That's a bargaining chip. So again, towns need to know what help they're willing to give and what help they need to give. And again, these are all, just tools to do that. Density bonuses are used. Some towns will assume the cost of building a road that the town needs. Again, the developer needs. Again, it's really up to the town. Towns have done some of these things, some have done all these things, some have done none of these things, and there's no right way to do it. Your town has to decide that itself. Again, these are all questions here, to understand where is the affordable housing? Are there better or worse places for it? Again, does it have the impacts that people think or not really? Where are there good examples? And like I talked to you before, this notion that towns are built out. Well, no, properties can be repurposed. So again, the principles to consider are, do we want people to come to this town? Do we need them? Do we think it's important for our municipal workers to work here? Are there jobs done by those who live in town or commute to town? And some towns, like I say, want to have town residents doing the jobs in town. That, I hope, are things to think about. I'm happy to answer questions, although I have an idea that you guys know as much as I know about this, but I'll try. Yes?
Well, thank you for this. It was very informative.
Steve, could you come to the microphone, please? Because being recorded. I'm sorry, because we won't hear it on TV.
Well, thank you for doing this. Very informative. Just for the record, Steve Miller is my name, and I spend a lot of my personal and professional time advocating for homeownership rights, and I agree with affordable housing. Question I have, which I think we could use a little insight to, is how do you deal with the costs that are rising significantly for building new housing?
Materials are up.
Significantly up.
Yeah. Again, if you can lower the developer's cost, if his materials costs are going up, maybe there's a way to lower his other costs. Now, like I said, that's going to be up to the town and what the town can afford and what the town wants to do and whether it wants to set precedents. I know my town right now is going to take, they're deciding on an inclusionary zoning ordinance, which is going to say that 10% of the units need to be income restricted, but they're going to put the income restriction at 80% of median income, so that is not going to cost the developer a lot in terms of revenue. They're also thinking of allowing more density. Like I said, they gave a tax abatement in the first time ever. They sometimes will negotiate parking requirements, but I would never tell the town what to do because it's hard. You can help. Some developments, as I'm sure you know, are just not going to pencil out. They're just not going to be doable. The guys who are doing that 300-unit development where they got the tax abatement said if they didn't get the abatement, they weren't going to be able to do it. They applied for historic tax credits, couldn't get them. That would have helped. So, again, if you can build up, great. You can, the developer can, spread his land cost over more units, but that's not going to be appropriate in some places.
Well, and housing costs in North Haven in the last year are up around 18 to 19%. So just keeping up with that pace, along with construction costs.
Yeah.
We could use as a committee, I think, and I'll speak for myself, not the committee, we could use some insight of how to, overcome those challenges.
Well, again, it's very, there are only basic things you can do, like we just talked about, and allowing more density. But, 20-story apartment homes in North Haven are just not going to fit the surroundings, and I wouldn't be surprised if neighbors said, no way. And so the question then is, after considering density and other things to do to help, sometimes towns have not waited for developers to come in, they've invited developers in. And I'm sure that First Selectman Frieda and Attorney Coppola and others in town know good developers who you can invite in. And I know some, and I'd be happy to provide names to them. There are mission-driven developers who know what they're doing, who have the right relationships with their banks for financing, who know where they're getting materials, who have the right contractors and subcontractors, and they can cut costs. they're not going to be able to probably pull a rabbit out of a hat, because sometimes, like I say, it's just not doable. But I would say that bringing good developers in who've done this before, that can help too sometimes, because they have ways of doing it, and they have deeper pockets, and they have enough income coming from other places that they can, get their money back over a longer period of time. So,
Well, thank you.
tough game.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Sure.
Thanks, it was very clear. But I'm a little bit of new to this, and I was wondering, I see you use, it seemed almost interchangeably, affordable housing and income-restricted housing.
Right.
Could you explain any difference?
Sure. Income-restricted housing is the more exact term. You can, through a deed restriction, or sometimes it's the terms, the restriction that the government requires if they give low-income financing to a developer, that says this unit must be sold or rented and be affordable, rather, for someone making 80% of median income, or 60% of median income, or 50% of median income. And so that unit cannot be sold or rented to anyone who makes more than that. And that's an income-restricted unit. An affordable unit is what, like I said, what people can afford. Affordable housing is the more generic term. In other words, do we have housing that people in town can afford? And like I said, I can't afford a $500,000 condo, but there are probably people, in North Haven or in surrounding towns that could. So for them, that would be affordable. For me, not so much. So affordable housing is the looser language. It just gets at the generic idea that people can afford it. Income restricted is, it's restricted to people of a certain income level or below, and it can't be sold or rented to people who make more than that.
So for example, when you meet, say, the threshold of 10% for affordable housing in a town, those affordable housing units aren't restricted by income at all, or?
Well, most units are not restricted to any income level. It's what the market will bear and what the people can afford. But that 10% threshold, I think you're talking about, is, if I'm not mistaken, correct me, is the 830G statute that says towns, if towns have less than 10% of their housing units restricted for people making 80% of median income.
That's it, but I was thinking that
if they have less than that, then the developer can come in and just override the local zoning and build what they want, unless it threatens public health or safety, and the burden is on the town to show that it won't do that. And so that's the 10% threshold you're talking about. But an income-restricted unit is restricted to that income level. That would be the simplest way to put it.
Like I say, I'm new to this, but that's why I was curious when that statute, Section 830, when that designates anything, but it seems like the 10%, but it seems like they use the term affordable housing. Maybe they didn't, and I haven't read it carefully enough. So, but it's actually income restricted also in some way, I think.
Yeah, and the units that would get a town to the 10% level have to be income restricted.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I just was clarifying for myself. Thank you.
Other questions?
Good evening, I'm Ray Andrewson, and a question I have is actually thinking about other projects historically in this community as it pertains to historic preservation and adaptive reuse of properties. Since we have a lot of single-family homes, we don't have a lot of factory buildings or warehouses or any of an historic structure. I think of the Clinton Agricultural Works in this town that was built in 1830, sat vacant for many decades, and then a developer turned it into fairly affordable small condo units. We don't have much of that stock here, so it seems like we would probably have to build out or use new construction. But if there were some other properties that could be repurposed, industrial or otherwise, how could we take advantage of any tax credits or any developer being incentivized for using or readapting to might be vacant or derelict properties?
Well, I mean, the state offers tax credits, low-income housing tax credits, but they don't offer to many developments a year. They're issued by the Federal Treasury Department, and the tax credits are purchased by large companies. I think in this state, Eversource, formerly Northeast Utilities, used to buy a lot of them because they needed the tax credit to lower their tax burden. And so that, by buying those credits, provides financing for. So there are 9% tax credits. There are 4% tax credits they're both issued by CHFA. The State Department of Housing also offers subsidy for developers. There's financing. Again, most successful developers have good relationships with their banks too, so they can get financing that way. There are historic tax credits, but like you say, if it's not a historic, and those are really, really in demand, and you have to make a really good case to get those. So the real issue is, again, when you all kind of try to assess what do we have and what do we need, the market will tell you a lot, because developers aren't stupid, and especially the ones that are not relying on a lot of other people's money, they're relying on their own money, they get a pretty good idea of what the market is. And as I've discussed with Jennifer and with other town attorneys and town officials, developers all believe, anybody can do it with their own money. The trick is to do it with somebody else's money. And they're always trying to get whatever they can from the town and from other people. But they will, when push comes to shove, decide whether they can make money on the deal. And, North Haven is a pretty nice town, and it's close to the shore, and you can get to New York, and you can, it's not only a nice place to be, it's an easy place to get out of and get to other nice places. So I think there's going to be demand. I don't think the demand for multifamily housing is a passing thing, because all of us baby boomers, they tell us, are going to live to be 80, 85, 90 years old. And so people are going to need a lot of multifamily housing. And, like I say, kids are going to need it longer. The average household size is lower, so people are going to say, we don't need a 4-bedroom colonial. We can do it with a 3-bedroom apartment. And they're going to live in them longer, or at least a larger percentage of them have. A lot of kids aren't getting married as soon or ever. So there's going to be demand for it. I think the market, like I say, in a lovely town like North Haven, is going to continue to attract developers who are going to do it. If I was the town, I wouldn't give away too much too fast. I think, a developer that's going to make 80% of the units market rate and 20%, say, or 15% income restricted for 80% of median income, which is not exactly low-income housing, a lot of those developers will be able to make that deal work and still make money, because they're not going to give up a whole lot on, of revenue, rental income from people making 80% of median income, especially if only 10 or 15% of the units are there. So there's not a lot of subsidy. There is some subsidy. There are other things the town can do, but that should be totally up to the town. But a place like North Haven is, like I say, a great place to live, and I think there'll be developers who'd be interested to come in here.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Real quick, David, talk about the next steps, the housing assessment and the land use assessment, please.
You mean in the RKG effort? Yeah. So right now, RKG Associates, the consultant that is going to do the research and help write the plan that hopefully the residents of North Haven will, in effect, write, because their input will come in. They're conducting a survey now of people's attitudes and desires about housing. There are some people who don't think the survey is that great. I understand why they think that. It's out in the field now. It's been extended to October 30th. I would encourage all of you to encourage people in town to answer the survey, and I believe it's on the website. I believe it's been sent around by email and social media. If that survey doesn't come out with as many responses as you would like, you're free to do another survey, your own survey. You know, when I did it with Guilford, they put it on their website, and like I said, they got 400 responses. I wouldn't do it right away, because some people might think, well, I did that survey already. I might wait until January, February, why not? And you can do your own, but that's, again, up to you. What will happen after the survey now is that RKG is going to meet with each individual town shortly after the first of the year. They will provide the towns with data that they've collected about your town. They will talk about the survey results, not just in this town, but in the neighboring towns and the region. That will be good information for you. They will then go back and do more research and come back and meet with your town as a part of a 3 or 4 town group and talk about the issues of housing markets and need in your town and surrounding towns. There will be an opportunity for forums. I would try, and Jennifer and Rich have the schedule, I would try to crowbar a wider town forum in there just to get ideas. And again, you know, I've volunteered to do this. I'm happy to come and help facilitate a forum for you if you want. If you want to get 200 people into a room, I'm happy to stay and answer their questions until they have no more questions anymore. But, you know, again, we can't expect residents of the town to know as much about housing as, you know, you guys know and you know, would be beneficial for them to know. Great, have a forum, explain stuff, answer questions for them, right? We can't expect, like I said, everybody to agree. Some people are gonna disagree. Okay, that's life, they're allowed. And some people are gonna be fearful of certain things. It's rational to be fearful, you know, like I said, it's their home. So we try to give them the research and the benefit of experience and, you know, see if we can allay their concerns. And then finally, they will meet with the town again and provide you with a draft plan for your town. And as you know, the state statute requires every town to have an affordable housing plan. I think it's by the end of June of 2022. So, and then redone every 5 years. So they will meet with the town, present the draft plan, want to hear from the town, and I would expect that the plan would be put on the website for people to read in most towns. I believe, you know, towns will probably have forums so people can come and ask questions and provide further input. And then ultimately, the town needs to adopt the plan. And I imagine that will be done by the Board of Selectmen. Maybe the Zoning Commission weighs in. You know, that's going to be up to the town. So it's a process. Like I say, it should be a process that involves as much public input as possible, because, you know, the residents here are good people. They care about the town, and they deserve to have the input. It's their town. So, and you all, as part of the advisory group, are going to be stewards of that and try to, you know, educate them, communicate with them, help a town conversation. I'll leave you with this. Old Saybrook did this. Now it's about 8 years ago. And they put together a committee. Mike Pace was the first selectman. And this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. You know, Mike was a Republican, and he was driving to work one day, and he saw people in maids' uniforms holding little kids' hands at bus stops outside of seasonal motels, which in the wintertime were being used as single-room occupancy housing. And he realized, holy mackerel, we have people working in this town who are essentially homeless. They don't have a real place to live. They're cooking on a hot plate in a motel room. And so we realized we got to do something in this town. And he got together the United Way and the largest congregation in town and the state rep and some of the key business people, and they put together a committee. And they had forum after forum. I went to more forums in Old Saybrook than I've ever gone to in my town. And they talked and they talked and they answered questions. And when they finally agreed to rezone certain areas of their downtown to allow a certain amount of income-restricted housing, there were no votes. No one got up at the public hearing to yell and scream. And so, the idea is you want to avoid acrimony in your town, not because you just want to avoid the acrimony. You want to do it because you want people to be satisfied with their town and continue to love the town that they've loved to this point, because that's why they're living here, right? And so you need them to have input. So, I told you I wouldn't tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you one thing to do. I would try to make sure that everybody knows at least that this is an opportunity for them to help shape the future of their town. And if you do that, people will continue to have a great town, because whatever you decide to create in the way of new housing opportunities will be created in places that they agree upon, and where they don't think you've messed up traffic patterns in neighborhoods and the town in general. So I would leave you with that.
So just quickly, I'll get myself the microphone. Just in follow-up to that, and David and I had a conversation about this. I've been the town's council for 23 years now, the Land Use Agency's council. I think I've had many affordable housing cases at this point for North Haven and for other towns. You don't want you don't want a developer deciding where your housing goes, quite simply. And that's a very important point. I think this is an opportunity, and it's a requirement by law to do this, but it should be viewed as an opportunity, and the process, people should be rolling up their sleeves and figuring out what could work for the town. So again, we are at that survey stage. We're at the housing needs assessment stage still. The housing survey is available under, I just went into the website to remember to say the right thing as to where it is on the homepage. So if you go into the town's website at town.north-haven.ct.us, the town now has a relatively new website, redone a few months back. And if you scroll down on the homepage, it says announcement and news, announcement and latest news. And you'll see something about the committee and also about the upcoming election, but there's a little button that says View All News. If you click on View All News, it'll bring you to a list of everything that's been posted to the website. If you scroll down, the survey originally came out on September 14th. We posted it to the website September 15th. It's still there. There's a flyer. If you click on, it says housing survey, housing plan survey. If you click on that, it's going to take you right to the link. Click on the link, bring you right into the survey to complete the survey. There's also a QR code. There are also paper copies of the survey, and this is very important too. There are paper copies of the survey available in the library, in the town hall. I know the senior center is giving copies out. Community services is giving copies out. So there are ways to get paper copies. Paper copies should be brought back to the town hall. Scrog is picking them up. You have until October 30th to complete it. Please do it. And we have, as David pointed out, we've gotten some complaints. You do the best that you can. There's some terminology that some folks are complaining about, whatnot. And again, this has gone to all. There's 13 member municipalities participating because there are 2 that had already started their process before the consultant was retained. But this is a survey that's being answered by the majority of the member municipalities in your council of government. So really, really important to participate in the survey. And please, we are going to establish a web page for the committee, and there'll be information regarding all the meetings of the committee. We'll make sure that there are minutes posted. that we have at least an audio recording. We've talked about making the meetings hybrid, so you could come in person, you could participate remotely in the meetings, come and ask questions, give your thoughts. You know, we want to have a real open discourse about this, and we want to get as much input as we can. David, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate you getting us off to a good start. I think you've provided a great overview and things for people to really think about. And in terms of focusing, because the point is going to be, once we've collected the data and the analysis is done, is to develop goals and develop action items. And that's where we're headed. And you know, these questions about, who do you want to come into town? What type of diversity of housing? That's a huge question for really all the towns. Is the diversity of housing question. What do you need more of? And you talked about, we know we have a very long list of seniors always looking for housing in our town. But just thinking about the way things have changed and how, families now living together again with seniors in the same home, children coming back from college, children coming back from graduate school, children started getting married and starting families later, and then living with parents. So there's a lot to discuss, and the committee needs to hear about your experiences and what you're doing in your own lives. So it's, again, important for the public to contribute.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the Town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.